This is a story about Spider-Man PS4. And I made it up, just letting you know. Or it leaked. One or the other, you can choose. This is part 2. If you haven't seen part 1, make sure you check that description for part 1. See that before you start this one. Alright, here we go. And he opens the door in his underwear, and she says, "Why are you in your underwear?" And then he realizes that he's in his underwear. He tells her to wait one moment. He closes the door. He runs back inside looking for some clothes, grabs some clothes, puts them on, opens the door, says, "Can we start again?" Hi. She says, "Hi." They have this nice little awkward romantic thing where you're as the audience and as the player are going, "Oh, this is so cool," because they love each other, but something's wrong. They have this little conversation, and it ends up ending with them going out to eat. So they're sitting at the diner and they're having these little weird, awkward conversations. Things like, "Oh yeah, you ordered that. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Oh, you got lemonade. Yeah, I got some lemonade from here last week. It was really good. Yeah. Oh yeah, it's good. Yeah." Peter breaks through the awkwardness and he just straight up apologizes. He says, I'm sorry. I understand that I hurt you. I'm sorry." And Mary Jane puts down her fork and knife and just looks at him. And he begins to try to explain what happened. He mentions that she kissed him and that it wasn't necessarily his fault, but he understands. Mary Jane cuts him off angrily and goes, "But you wouldn't have told me. The only reason you told me is because I had pictures of it." And Peter looks at her and he doesn't know what really to say because he does not want to lie, but he also knows that he has to say the right thing, because if he says the wrong thing, this can go really bad for him. So then he looks at her and he asks, does she believe him? Does she believe that he did not insinuate the kiss and that he did not want to kiss her? Mary Jane wasn't expecting that question. And after some time, she breaks and she does say that she does believe him. He reassures her that he hasn't seen the other girl in so long and that he never meant to hurt Mary Jane, that he loves Mary Jane. And they have a moment where they kind of connect and it's really warm. So then things are better. Things are nice. Mary Jane asks Peter,
"With Fisk behind bars, what's next?"
And Peter goes,
"And the city's safer than ever. Maybe Peter Parker can have more of a life."
And then Mary Jane says something about, what is this life going to contain? And Peter says, the ones that he loves. And they look at each other. And it's so cute. It's so nice. Then Mary Jane asks if she could have the keys to his apartment back. And Peter looks at her and smiles. And he says, of course. And he gives them back to her. And then they have this nice little moment. And then Peter wakes up in his apartment. He looks around. And he realizes that Mary Jane's keys were still on the table where they last were. He realized that he had just dreamt going out to eat with Mary Jane and patching everything up. He gets a little mad and says he should have known it was a dream when she says something about Kingpin. Peter looks around his room and notices something different. There's a slip under his door. He goes to it and it's an eviction notice. His rent is way past due and now he's being evicted. Peter then thinks about yesterday and realizes that his aunt is working for Martin Lee. He web swings on out of there and goes to the homeless shelter. He gets to the homeless shelter and he's kind of frazzled and his aunt is talking to him, but she realizes that he's acting a little bit weird, a little bit awkward, a little bit nervous. And then she says,
"Are you in trouble? Do you need money?"
No, I mean, I'm a little behind on my rent, but no, I'm fine.
But Aunt May insists that something's going on with Peter because she knows him and he's acting a little bit weird. Then Peter just goes, "Well, what do you think about Martin Lee? Is he weird? Have you noticed anything weird about him?" Aunt May goes, "No, he's a great person. I actually want to talk to you about that. So I talked to him about you getting paid for working yesterday and the day before. And he said something that I was not expecting. He wants to give you this homeless shelter." Peter goes, "What?" May says it surprised her too, but as she was talking to Martin Lee about Peter, about his background, about his financial struggles, Martin Lee began to talk about his background, his struggles, and how he wants to continue his community development work. This would mean that he would have to leave the homeless shelter, and his thing was that he wanted to leave the homeless shelter in the hands of someone that he can trust and someone that he feels is capable of running it to the best it can possibly be ran. It was at that point where he suggested that he give it to Aunt May and Peter. And at that moment, Martin Lee walks up and he says something charming like, "Is that my my cue. He looks at Peter and he goes, his aunt has told him a lot about him and that he's impressed, and he thinks that Peter is a young man that can do a lot of great things for the community. He tells Peter that he was like him at his age and that he really trusts Peter with this homeless shelter. He ends by saying,
"Take care of this place. It represents the best part of me."
Peter is shocked and he doesn't know what to do. Martin Lee and Aunt May are standing in front of him and they're just looking at Peter with this shocked look on his face. And Martin Lee says something like, well, he's clearly shocked by all this. I'll let you two continue talking. I'll be over here if you need me. And Martin Lee walks away and Peter looks at his aunt and he goes, "We're gonna be in charge of a homeless shelter?" And his aunt goes, "Well, you're gonna be in charge of the homeless shelter." And Peter is just like, whoa, this is not what I was expecting. And then in his head he goes, the leader of a gang is in charge of a homeless shelter and just gave me that homeless shelter. What does that mean? Peter looks at Aunt May and goes, well, where is Martin Lee about to go? What is he about to do? And Aunt May says that he wants to continue community development, whether it's in politics or something else, he wants to continue. So after Peter has the conversation with Aunt May, he steps back and he's trying to figure out what's going on, why Martin Lee gave him the responsibility of being in charge of this homeless shelter, and where he's going. Why is he leaving? He then thinks, is it possible that Martin Lee knows who Peter is? But he says that's impossible. How would he know that? So he comes to the conclusion that he needs to directly confront Martin Lee. Whether this is a good idea or a bad idea, it doesn't matter. He thinks this is what he should do. And he walks back inside and he's looking for Martin Lee and he can't find him. He goes to Aunt May. He says, have you seen Martin Lee? Where did he go? He was just here. And Aunt May says, I'm not sure. He probably just stepped out. He's a really busy man. He'll be back soon. Peter goes, okay. And Aunt May tells Peter just to relax and think about the idea. Think about the opportunity, what it would mean to have his own business. Just think about it. Peter says, okay. And he kisses Aunt May on the cheek and he steps out. So Peter leaves and he's Spider-Man now, web swinging around. He's trying to figure out what is going on with Martin Lee. Why is he acting one way and then acting an entirely different way? He then comes to the conclusion that he needs to call Yuri Watanabe and let her know who the leader of the Inner Demons is. Yuri Watanabe answers the phone, but there's a lot of background noise and she's speaking really quietly, and she tells Spider-Man that she can't speak right now because she's at a press conference being held by Mayor Osborn, in which he's talking about the new rise of the Inner Demons within the city and presenting Captain Watanabe an award for her leadership in the arrest of Wilson Fisk. She abruptly hangs up and Peter says, well then, I guess I need to go to the press conference. Spider-Man web swings to New York City Hall where the press conference is being held, and when he gets there, he goes on a rooftop far back and he makes a little quip about how this looks more like a re-elect Osborn for mayor conference than it does for crime. He's on a rooftop and he's looking down at the crowd and he notices somebody. It's Mary Jane. He immediately gets the idea that he needs to go talk to her. He takes off his suit, becomes Peter Parker, and goes down to talk to her. He then thinks, I can't just walk up to her and say, hey, it has to be a mistake, because he doesn't want it to seem like he was stalking her, but he wasn't stalking her, but he's, going through his nervous thing, and then he says, I'm just going to bump into her accidentally. And he'd be like, oh, Mary Jane, hi, how are you doing? And he does that, and it's very, very awkward. He does it and Mary Jane immediately goes, wow, you did that on purpose. You could have just said hello. And Peter goes, yeah. And they have a little bit of a conversation, but it doesn't really go anywhere. And the press conference begins and Mary Jane starts taking pictures while Peter just stands there feeling very uncomfortable and wanting to speak to Mary Jane, but not knowing how to or knowing what to say. Peter takes a deep breath. He looks at Mary Jane. He says, Mary Jane? She goes, what? While she's still taking pictures. And before he can say what he's about to say, his spider sense goes off. He notices Martin Lee is standing in the crowd. Then a negative explosion happens where Mayor Osborn and other police officers were standing. Cars pull up that are from the Inner Demons and they begin shooting in the crowd. An explosion happens on the left and right side of the press conference as well. People are running, people are screaming, people are panicking. The police began shooting at the Inner Demons. Peter looks at Mary Jane, grabs her hand, and guides her away from where they are because they are in the middle of gunfire and chaos. People are running, people are screaming, more explosions are happening. Mary Jane tells Peter that she'll be fine and for him to just go. Peter looks at her, nods, and he leaves to go put on his Spider-Man suit. Now the gameplay would transition to you being Mary Jane. Mary Jane would be taking pictures but trying to get out of harm's way while still taking as many pictures as she can. She then sees Martin Lee and he gets into a truck. Mary Jane takes a picture and the truck takes off driving. Mary Jane runs across the street taking more pictures. She gets into her vehicle and she looks and she sees that cops are following the truck that Martin Lee left in and that the police are still shooting the inner demons. Yuri Watanabe calls up Spider-Man, telling him what had just happened and that Mayor Osborn may have been assassinated. Spider-Man says, "I'm on my way." Spider-Man appears. Now you're playing as Spider-Man and you have to take out the other inner demons that are around. Yuri Watanabe gets in her car and she begins to drive, following the other police officers that are following the inner demons and the truck Martin Lee got in. Then the gameplay switches back to Mary Jane, and now Mary Jane is in her car following all of this chaos from the back. You then see all of the accidents. You see Spider-Man swinging to catch up. You see accidents, gunfire, all of this, and as Mary Jane, you're trying to dodge traffic as well as not get shot. And you see Spider-Man taking down some of the inner demons' vehicles. While he's taking down the vehicles, he notices that Mary Jane is following behind in her vehicle. He jumps on top of her car and begins yelling. He says, "What are you doing? Stop. This is not what you're not supposed to be here." And that's where I'm going to end part 2. If you want to see part 3, subscribe because it's coming soon and a lot sooner than it took for part 2 to come out. Subscribe though and hit the like button if you like the video. Share this video around with all of your friends. Maybe send it to Insomniac. Let's see what they say. I don't know. Have a good one, y'all. Peace out.